Good morning, everyone. We are so excited that you are here to join us and tuning in for Digital Learning Day. We hope you're doing well. I'm Kelsey Pacer.
I'm Chris Biagiroli.
And we are your MCs for this Digital Learning Day YouTube Live event. So we are very excited about the lineup of presenters that we have for you today. So we have a long list of teachers and integrators from around the district who have a variety of tools to share with you. So we couldn't be more excited for you. We hope you take a lot away from this experience. So right now you are on, we are live, and if you have to step away and teach a class, we understand. If you need to tune back in and see any of the other presentations throughout the day or maybe at a later time, if you're so interested, they're going to be posted on the Digital Learning Day website on the CCPS EdTech Hub. So I'm going to, go ahead, Chris.
And I was going to say, and if you're not down in the EdTech Hub, be sure to follow the hashtag on Twitter, CCPSDLD. We should have our Keebler elves in the background tweeting out all of the videos throughout the day.
So I'm going to show you very quickly just how you can navigate to share. Okay, so right now, if you are on excuse me. Okay, if you go over to the EdTech Hub, this is our Digital Learning Day website. If you scroll down later on, and relatively quickly, we'll be able to post each of the different session links in this table. So in a timely manner, you'll be able to just go on and watch them when you have time. So if you come up with a question, whether it's during the live presentation or if afterwards you have a question or some feedback you want to share with the presenters, you can go to this question form right here. And all you'll need to do is just select which session your feedback is for, ask the question, and we'll be able to circle back and either get you an answer in real time or be able to send the question along to the presenter and they'll be able to circle back. So, oops, cancel. Sorry, guys. So now I think we are ready for
Catherine to talk about coding with world language students using Scratch. So we're going to switch over to Catherine here, and she will be able to
get started. Oops, sorry guys. Unmute. I'm sorry. Technical difficulties.
Oh, hold on.
What have we?
Oh. I think it was me, guys. I'm so sorry. It was me. Thank you for unmuting me, and I'm so excited to be here. I'm Catherine Mazzola, and I'm going to go ahead and just turn over to a screen share so that you can see my presentation. I wanted to first and foremost remind you guys to go ahead and tweet at Madame Mazzola and hashtag CCPSDLD with any questions or comments. I would love to hear if after the presentation you decide to go forward with using Scratch, in particular with your world language students, but just in general, please be sure to share that with me. I'd love to continue the conversation in that way, in addition to being able to see your comments and questions on the Digital Learning Day website and YouTube channel. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started because I am very excited to share about how I started to code with my students in the world language classroom. So my inspiration was I was actually in France, I take my students to France, and I was in a bookstore and I came across this book, À vous marquerez coder. And I had just done the hour of code with my students in that school year. And I thought, my goodness, how could I possibly, obviously I want to buy this book, but then how could I possibly bring it back and use this with my students to teach them and get excited about learning French through maybe a possible other passion of theirs, coding. So of course, I got back to Midlothian High School, and the first thing that I did was reach out to our fabulous integrator, Matt Fuqua. And Matt Fuqua took the time to actually read through this document, or this text, and mind you, he does not speak French, and he earmarked all of the sections of this book that he thought would be approachable for my students. And so that was sort of the springboard for me, is I got inspired by this particular thing, and I thought, hey, with the available supports, I believe that my students and I, we can do this. We can go ahead and start coding in French. So Matt really gave me the tools that I needed to go ahead and get started with that. The first thing he said to go ahead and do was to create a Scratch Educator account. So that is something, if you're going to do this with your students, that you need to do well in advance, because it does, it could take, a couple business days for your educator account to be approved. But as you can see on the screen right now, the fabulous thing about Scratch is that you can change it into virtually any language. They have the interface, Scratch, which is a web-based interface, is going to allow you to code using any language that you might possibly teach. So that was the interest for me, to be able to code with my students in French. And again, if you haven't already done the hour of code, that was a good place to start. And my students had already done the hour of code. And so that gave them practice, because a lot of the hour of code, which is like an hour-long basic intro to coding, those are like modules that they can do. A lot of those are through Scratch. And you can actually search the modules and find out which ones are available in your target language. And so I just went ahead and created like a template for my students to complete as they went through and tried the module. And I really set that Google Doc up so that they would go through and really dig out the vocabulary. I made them a vocabulary list of just basic terms. So they had already gone through all of this. They've already done an hour of code. Definitely start there if this is your first time ever. Okay, so I created the account with Scratch. And I quickly learned that CCPS already has teachers out there coding with Scratch, and they have set guidelines. So one of the important things that you must know if you are planning to do this with your students is that one, you have to have a teacher account, and two, what I recommend is that you create the accounts for the students so that you can make sure that the account information is within the guidelines of CCPS. So what I went ahead and did is I created my classes, and then I just uploaded my roster, and I created a username for the kids, and I created a password for them. And again, I followed those CCPS guidelines for student privacy by not using their full CCPS ID number or their full first name and last name. Okay, so once I went ahead and created my classes, then I could go in and create a studio. So this is really an important piece, because once you've created them an account, you might not necessarily be able to go and look at what they're working on unless they share it in a studio. So the studio space is sort of like a bulletin board that you create inside of your virtual classroom in Scratch. So once you create the studio space, it's really important to go ahead and get the kids started on their project. And again, this is one of the things that I really emphasize with my students, because we want the benefit of them being able to do this in the target language, that in the upper left-hand corner, wherever there's a globe, they can actually toggle back and forth between French and English, or whatever target language you're trying to get them to use in English. So that's very helpful. I tell them that, the goal is for you to do this and use your French to do it. But if you get stuck, you can know that you can always toggle back and forth to English to problem solve. So one of the things that I very quickly realized needed to be communicated to the students is that there needs to be clear naming parameters for the project, just like any project you would have them do where they save it as a file or audio file, video file, and it's not necessarily clear who that project might belong to. You want to make sure that you give them clear naming parameters. And then it's vital for them to be able to join or to add their project to your studio. So they're already in the class, but whatever they create might not necessarily be associated with the class unless they add their project to the studio. So that's where this big orange button comes in. Once the students have named their project according to the naming parameters that we set out, then they need to go ahead and share that project to our class studio. So that's how you set it up. Now then, I wanted to use my resources to be able to teach them how to use Scratch in the target language. So some of the things that I did to teach them how to use Scratch in the target language, I created presentations where I really emphasized, we were doing some of the most basic functions that you can do in Scratch. So I really emphasized, le lutin, that's your sprite, l'arrière-plan, the background, the vocabulary that they're going to need in order to do what they need to do within the interface is what you want to teach them in your presentation. So whatever your objective is for them to do, you want to teach them the vocabulary so that they know how to do that. And a lot of times you're teaching them both the vocabulary in English and in the target language. One of the activities that I did was that I just took, this is actually from the book, this particular image, but I just took a screenshot. You could take a screenshot of what's happening in Scratch and then sort of define what each of the buttons would do, and then have them do like a matching activity where they match, what is this, when you click on this button, what does it actually do? So that's what that Google Draw activity is there. Okay, so then the other important thing was defining the task. So for me, this was my very first foray into this really challenging sort of world. So I kept it simple. I said, all that I want you guys to do is to create a video game. The context is going to be a fairy tale because we were doing the fairy tale unit. I want you to have an original main character. The user is going to have to move that character to complete tasks. And I want there to be 2 separate backgrounds, and I want for the character to, at one point in the story, transition from background 1 to background 2. So the language piece that I really wanted them to use had to do with the narration and also what the character says. So in French, we have 2 different versions of the past. Well, we have more than that, but the 2 different versions of the past that we focus on level 3 are sort of the past that describes what's going on in the background, and then the version of the past that describes what happened. So that's why I felt that Scratch was so perfect, is because we could have in the background narration, we can have what was going on, and in the bubble text, we could have the character saying, once he's accomplished each task, what happened. So then we practice. I asked them to go ahead and go to the go into Scratch, go into their project that they just created, and I tasked them with just practicing going through and finding a background from the library, and also uploading a background from an image that they found online. Then, of course, they could go and modify that background. So one of the modifications that I require they do is add narration. So they might have to have like 3 or 4 different versions of the same background with that text scrolling through. One of the challenges that we ran into is within the Scratch interface, there's no possibility to add accents, but you are painting a picture. It's really basic, almost like reminds me of MS Paint. You can actually go in and add like a line over top of the word for it to have an accent. So there's ways to get around that. Another really cool thing that I discovered is with the text bubbles, you can actually have them record them saying what the character says and then have them add that. So not only can the character have a text bubble, but they can record their voice saying whatever the text bubble says. So I really thought there was a lot of merit to that. One of the things that I realized after the fact is, gee, I really wish that I had time to proofread their French before they put it in their presentation. So that's why I sort of suggested, to avoid spelling errors and grammar mistakes, have them do a storyboard on paper beforehand where you can give them feedback on spelling and make corrections and make sure that the final product looks great. So this is what it looks like when they are working on their project. So what I want to show you guys is a student sample. It was messy. I'm going to be very honest, but I kind of expected that because it was the first time we were doing it. And we had a huge variety, not only of ability now with proficiency in the target language, but also proficiency in coding. So I wanted to just show you, this is one of the final products by one of my students last year. So at the top of the screen, you see the narration. This is what was going on. And then the character saying the instructions in French. As you can see, the student was particularly strong with coding and French. That was one of really the cool things about this doing this project with my kids, is that I uncovered through this project these secret gems, these kids that really got to show other kids how to do things through coding. So it was cool. Okay, so one of the cool things about this particular project is you get to pick between feeding the monster or killing the monster, and I thought that was really creative. So I believe that my time has come to an end. I just wanted to say real quick before I go that there are some really awesome resources right here in Richmond. Code RVA, of course, but also Scratch Ed, and then there's the Scratch Facebook group that you can join for additional support. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share what I do with Scratch.
All right, thank you so much, Catherine. That was really interesting. It was such a cool multi-layered approach to teaching vocabulary, and it challenged me to bring up some of my high school French. So we like that.
Oh, awesome.
I also liked how you gave a lot of good tips with just sound project design. So whether technology is involved or not, I like the process that you led your kids through, and how you gave them opportunities to practice and make sure that they had a really quality product at the end.
That's key. Thank you, guys.
All right. Up next on Digital Learning Day are actually 2 pre-recorded sessions, one from Shannon Carr at Byrd High School of using technology to promote global collaboration. And then directly after that, we have some school spotlights at 9:45. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel and you'll see both of those videos pop up. And we'll be back live with you at 10 a.m. From Midlothian Middle. So we're coming from Midlothian High to Midlothian Middle. So.
All right, see you soon.